Well, it's a joy to be back. It's been a few years, I think, Pastor John, since I had an opportunity to worship with you. It's good to see the church growing. I'm just mindful of the needed faithfulness when you started the church. Kay and I were 6 years in Durant Elementary School from 1999 to 2005. And then we had the privilege of building the place where we're at now. So I have been where you are, loading up, setting out, tearing down, rinse, wash, repeat, with all the challenges, especially with kids. And thank you for honoring the children here and just trying to invite someone to do church in elementary school. You guys know the challenges of all of this. And I commend you for it. And I commend you for your faithfulness. And I know that the Lord has some exciting things in your future. So, John Kelly, thank you for 7 years, has it been? 7 years of faithfulness. You guys have gone through 8? 8 years. Even more. 8 years of faithfulness. Thank you for that. Well, Ruth chapter 3. I was dwelling on this statement that Paul made to the church at Corinth. He says, we do not walk by sight, walk by faith. Like this, that's a strange but fascinating statement that he makes. Our walk, which when the Bible talks about walk, he talks about our lifestyle. Our walk is by faith, not by sight. The author of Hebrews talked about faith as things that we hope for, but things that we cannot see, which is challenging because we love that idea, right? Walk by faith. But it's the whole not by sight thing that infuses some fear in us, because tomorrow you got to make decisions. You got to decide what your life's going to be like tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to have challenges. And walking by faith and not by sight then can get interesting in the day-to-day stuff. Sometimes we like to talk about faith in the big picture stuff, but what does walking by faith and not by sight look like for you tomorrow? And at times, sometimes the future that we cannot see can immobilize us. It can cause fear in us. And so the book of Ruth and this amazing story, I think, is so helpful, because when we look at the life of Ruth, here is a woman who is often put in the most vulnerable of situations. And she epitomizes what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. You learned that last week when she made her covenant. She had no idea what she was getting into. She just was going to make this covenant to Naomi, and she was going to keep it. And so her days that follow were really difficult days. And so one of the things I think that we're going to learn in our study this summer about Ruth is, what does it mean to walk by faith? Where is that faith being laid? And what I love about Ruth is that she always seems simply to do the next right thing, which I think is the key of walking by faith and not by sight. We don't know what the future holds. And yes, sometimes the future can be fearful. For those of us who are aging, we think about the future and our health issues. For those who are young and newly married and just getting started, you're considering what a family would look like, what finances would look like. For those who have other major decisions. And sometimes as we start to get beyond the day, we fail to do what Jesus taught us to do, and that's not worry about tomorrow. Well, there's no one in the Bible that I think that epitomizes what Jesus instructed us to do to Ruth. She wasn't looking beyond the tomorrow. She just took on every day by faith, which leads me to this statement. That a life of faith is built upon many small but continual decisions simply to do the next right thing. Then what happens is the providence of God is wed to your faithful obedience, and you find yourself living by faith, not by sight. And my friends, that's a life worth living. So let's look at Ruth 3 and see how this all unfolds. Now, we've been to the point now where we are at the evening of the threshing floor. And again, Naomi takes the center stage. So not to be a complete spoiler, but the book of Ruth is about Naomi primarily and Ruth secondarily. Because Naomi is the Israelite that is absolutely necessary in order for us to have Jesus. All right, so Naomi in this story really does epitomize the nation of Israel. Having to leave, wander in the wilderness, struggle, and now finally yearning and finding redemption. So Naomi takes center stage. And what we know about Naomi is she has absolutely fallen in love with Ruth. I mean, you can't imagine a better daughter-in-law than Ruth has been. So faithful. And Naomi has a heart for her, and yet she is also concerned about her namesake, because she doesn't have anyone to carry on the family lineage. So she's got to ask Ruth to do something that I don't even know if she would be willing to do. But she's got to ask Ruth to do this. And so let's pick it up as Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, says to her, "My daughter, shouldn't I find rest for you so that you will be taken care of?" Now isn't Boaz our relative? We'll learn more about that here in a few minutes. Haven't you been working with his female servants? This evening he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. So wash, put on perfumed oil, wear your best clothes, go down to the threshing floor, but do not let the man know that you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, notice the place where he is lying. Go and uncover his feet and lie down, that ye will explain to you what you should do. So Naomi recognizes that she desperately needs a redeemer, and she desires for Ruth to have one as well. So in her desperation, she decides to play matchmaker, which mother-in-laws can be very easily. And she is going to ask Ruth to go to the threshing floor on a particular night that God has providentially designed so that Boaz will be given the full opportunity to be the family redeemer. And God had set the whole thing up. Just happens to be the barley harvest. And Boaz is out there looking over his harvest as he should. And he will be there at night after the winnowing of the barley to get all the chaff off. And in his big, expensive pile of barley grain will be lying there. And Boaz will want to enjoy a meal and then lay down next to it in the cool, fine air. And all of this is set up for this really important decision that Boaz will have to make. So Naomi and Ruth, they don't have much. And she says to Ruth, okay, look, I'm going to need you to do something. You don't fully understand all the ramifications of this, because remember, Ruth was a Moabitess. She didn't know Israelite culture or custom. And so, once again, Naomi is saying to Ruth, okay, I'm going to need you to go do this, and you have to do it this way. And Ruth is like, okay. So let's wash you, which that may seem, common for you if you were going to go out on a very important night date, but they didn't wash much back then, so this is going to be a special bath night. Put on some perfume. Naomi and Ruth didn't have any finances, and so that bottle of perfumed oil would have been precious to them, not unlike, if you recall, this woman named Mary who had her dowry, this very expensive bottle of perfume, and she broke it, poured it over Jesus' feet, and Judas was mad about it. And yet Jesus said, you don't even understand this, what this woman has done. She has anointed me for my burial, and she'll be talked about, and I'm talking about it right now. So like in the same way, Naomi gives Ruth this little vial of expensive perfumed oil and puts it on her, and I'm guessing she didn't have an elaborate dress, but the best that Ruth had, and dress yourself up, and then go down to the threshing floor. But she says, wait. You got to wait until Boaz is through working, and then he has freshened himself, and he has eaten and had something to drink, and he's going to lay down satisfied. And then you always ask, which if you've been married for any amount of time, you know, if you've got an important question to ask your husband, feed him a good meal first. Because the way to his heart is through his stomach. And that worked then, it works today. And so after he has eaten, and now that he is resting, then here's the interesting thing. She says, go in and cover his feet and lay down. And then he'll explain to you what you must do. And so Naomi is asking Ruth to place herself in an incredibly vulnerable situation. Like, Boaz could basically do anything he wanted, right? At that point. I mean, Ruth has no rights. She's not an Israelite. She's a woman. Doubly no rights. And completely vulnerable. And yet she is going to do all of this for Naomi. First and foremost, Ruth is doing this for Naomi because she had made that covenant with Naomi. Where you go, I go. To tell me to do, I'll do. Your God's going to be my God. Okay, if this is how it works, I'm willing to do that. I love the story of Beauty and the Beast. You need more stories like that. Because Belle, she risks her life to save her father by placing herself under the misunderstood beast's care. It is very redemptive. She's willing to risk her life, and then he in turn is willing to risk his life, and the redemption of it all is the result. And here again is where we see Ruth doing what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. She had no idea what the night was. Naomi did not. She had no idea what would happen to her when she laid down at the feet of Boaz and uncovered his feet. And yet she was willing simply to do the next right thing. That's a life well lived. You don't know what tomorrow will hold. You simply look at the day and you ask yourself, what is the right thing for me to do now? And for Ruth, it was obedience. And so she did it. And it's hard to do sometimes when you don't know what the future holds. And it's really difficult to live this way when your life is conflicted. I have been preaching through 1 Samuel at Open Door, and was so mindful of David, who also epitomizes this concept of just simply do the next right thing. Because David faced all kinds of challenges. I mean, here he had been faithful to King Saul. Saul turns against him, is trying to hunt him down. David is a renegade on the loose, and everyone wants to kill him. King Saul does, the Philistines do, everybody wants to kill him, and he finds himself hiding in caves, and he cries out to the Lord. Psalm 62, he says, I love this. He says, I am at rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I will never be shaken. So David, in the times of his desperation, calls upon the Lord for redemption, and just simply like Ruth, does the next right thing. And honestly, there is the plan of salvation, Lito. First desperation, then redemption. If you never get to desperation, you're never going to find redemption. You're not going to want to find it. You're not going to feel like you have a need for it. First, you have to into the place of desperation. And so thank God, as you look back on your testimony of becoming a Christian, that God put you in a place of desperation. So that when he revealed redemption, you really wanted it. Praise be to God for desperation. And that was Ruth. That was Naomi. I mean, honestly, they were desperate. They had zero opportunity to survive. 2 women, no husbands, in Israelite culture, in the little town of Bethlehem, no opportunities. This was it. This was their move of desperation. And for us, it's the same way. Like David, we've got to get to that place where we say, Jesus, you're all I have. You're all I need. That is enough. That's a good place to be. I think sometimes what we do is we want Jesus, we just want a whole bunch of other things, and we almost demand them and add them to having Jesus. But living by faith is this desperate declaration, Jesus, you're all I have, you're all I need, and that is enough. Anything else is just added grace. And I love that about Ruth and David and us, and we live like that. And so here's Ruth, verse 5. And after Naomi says, I need you to go and do this, Ruth says to her, I will do everything you say. What a remarkable woman. What an amazing woman this is. She said, okay, I'll go down, I'll hide. After he eats and drinks and lays down, he's all covered. I'll go and lay next to his feet, and I'll uncover his feet, and I'll wait. And so verse 6, she goes down to the threshing floor and does everything that her mother-in-law had charged her to do. And after Boaz ate and drank, it was in good spirits. He went to lie down at the end of the pile of barley. She came in secretly, uncovered his feet, and laid down. Which, by the way, this wouldn't have worked for me because I have to sleep with my feet uncovered. Like, I can't stand the bondage of the blanket on my toes. They have to be exposed, like this. So it would have to be a different story. It was working. But Boaz, aging Boaz, he was wise. He knew at some point in time that cool breeze over the Mediterranean Sea was going to reach Bethlehem, and he was going to get chilly, so he covered up. And as he did that, verse 8, he was resting, sleeping well. At midnight, he was startled, turned over, and there laying at his feet was a woman. So he asked the obvious question, who are you? And the response is, I am Ruth. 2 things she says. She says, I'm your servant. And then she says, take me under your wing because you are a family redeemer. 2 things. First, she says, I'm Ruth. I'm your servant. I am putting myself in full submission to you to do whatever you decide to do. And then she makes her request. And she says, take me under your wing because you are the Hebrew term is Goel. Goel. It's a really, really important term. Family redeemer or kinsman redeemer. If you go all the way back to the book of Leviticus in the law, where this concept first arises. The Goel, or the family redeemer, was a significant person within the family clan. So the way that Israel was divided up was clans. And blood is thicker than water amongst Israelite clans, right? So if you're in a clan, then you are really intimately attached to one another. You know, like some southern families that I have known where there are first cousins and second cousins and third cousins and everybody knows everybody and it's thick, right, in the family atmosphere. Well, within the Israelite clans, there would always be one significant male who was appointed Goel, or kinsman redeemer. And there were 4 responsibilities given for the Goel. And Boaz was this for his clan, which had followed Naomi, by the way. So the first responsibility for the kinsman redeemer was to protect the clan's property. Right? Remember, Israel was a nation that was divided up, and each of the tribes and then clans were given land. It was imperative to keep the land. Imperative. Like many laws were given to instruct the people, keep your land. But at times, if you find yourself in a vulnerable situation, unable to keep the land, sometimes you have to sell it. And it would be the family redeemer's responsibility, if he could, to buy back the land. All right. So purchasing what belongs to them. Secondly, there would be a necessity if you were really desperate and you had to sell yourself as a slave or sell one of your children as a slave just for financial reasons, for survival, then it would also be the responsibility of the Goel to go and purchase back that slave. And in the purchasing back of a slave, that person is restored back as a family. Right? So the family redeemer either purchases the land or purchases his people back from slavery to become family. The third thing, and this primarily relates to the story of Ruth, is the family redeemer would have to perform something which is called levirate marriage. And this is how it works. You see a horrible example of this in Genesis with Judah and Tamar. Levirate marriage is a continuation of a man's lineage. So let's say a man and a woman are married and he dies and there isn't a male heir. It would be the Goel's responsibility to take this widow, marry this widow, produce a male heir, and then give the male heir the name of the deceased husband, not his name. Give them the name of the deceased husband in order to continue on the family line. That is primarily what Naomi is asking for in this story, is for levirate marriage. The final responsibility of the Goel is a little bit more harsh. If someone in the clan is murdered, it is the Goel's responsibility to go after the murderer, if it's first degree murder, and kill that person blood for blood. And that's the law, unless the person escapes to what's called a city of refuge if he feels that his killing of the person was accidental. But so Boaz has these really important responsibilities. And I want you to keep those things in mind, if you would, until the end. So here's Ruth, and she has placed her hands in Naomi's care, and Naomi says, now go place yourself in Boaz's care and ask if he would redeem us. Ask him that. Because in Boaz, Naomi knew that there was a man worthy of redeeming them. It's not unlike Psalm 91, where we sing about the desire for the Lord's protection to redeem his children. It says he will cover you with his feathers. You will take refuge under his wings. His faithfulness will be a protective shield. That desire for a king to come and provide that type of redemptive care, to have someone so powerful enough with such ability to care for you, to completely redeem you. And when King Jesus shows up and he looks over the lostness of Israel, he's heartbroken. Because there's no one who is shepherding the sheep of Israel. And Jesus says, how often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Jesus has always had this desire to be the Goels, the family redeemer. Well, here's Boaz's response. He's startled. He's like, what's happening?
He looks down, there's this young woman at his feet. He's like, am I dreaming? Pissing himself.
And then he realizes it's Ruth. And as you know already, he has become very fond of Ruth. And now, here is really important. There's absolutely no physical description of Ruth or Boaz. None. So I appreciate the coloring books. Ruth is very beautiful. We don't know. I'm pretty sure Boaz was not handsome. We're going to hear him say in a second, like, you chose me. It wasn't her physical beauty, it was her spiritual beauty. Like, he saw fortitude, he saw faith, he saw honor, he saw loyalty, he saw nobility in this foreign widow. And he says, may the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than even before, because you've not pursued younger men, rather rich or poor. He's like, hey, I'm the whole guy, dude. You're offering yourself to me. And I love this of verse 11. He says, now don't be afraid, my daughter. I will do for you whatever you say, since all the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Isn't that great? He says to her, yes, it is true that I'm a family redeemer, but then Boaz is going to throw a foil in the plot here. Something that Ruth hadn't expected, which, by the way, I don't even think Ruth really knew all that was going on. I think she was just simply doing the next right thing. She didn't understand all these customs. But a part of the levirate marriage custom is the closest male relative gets first right of refusal on levirate marriage. And now Boaz is going to bring this up. He goes, it's true, I am a family redeemer, but there is a redeemer closer than I am. So here's what Boaz says to Ruth, and we'll get the full story until next week. He says, stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, that's good. Let him redeem you. But if he doesn't want to redeem you, here's Boaz's commitment. As the Lord lives, I will. I'll lie down and wait until the morning. I'm fascinated by this. Now we understand that Boaz legally didn't even have to do this. Now we know he wasn't bound by law to take Ruth as his wife. He had to make the decision on his own. And he says, I will. Yes, I would. What was it about Boaz? That he would look to this foreign Moabitess widow and decide to take her in all the responsibilities, because if you take Ruth, you take Naomi. You're taking the responsibility of caring for these women, and any family that might be produced from that point on is a huge responsibility. Why? Why? You know, something about the providence of God as you look at the story of the Bible just continually amazes me. You see, one of the reasons why I think that Boaz looked at Ruth and smiled and said, "You're an amazing woman. You have a noble character." I think one of the reasons why he was willing to do this is because there was something about Ruth that reminded him about his mama. You know who Boaz's mother was? A woman named Rahab. You see, there was a day when Joshua crossed over the Jordan River and all the Israelites were now in the promised land, and the first thing they had to do was conquer Jericho, and he sent out the spies. They found this prostitute, had to sell herself to care for her family, and yet there was something about her. God had just impressed such great faith in her, where she was willing to risk herself and her family to align with these Israelite spies and the nation. And in doing so, when the walls of Jericho tumbled down, God spared Rahab and her family, and she incorporated herself into the nation of Israel. And there was an Israelite named Salmon who looked at her and said, "Yeah, I know you're not an Israelite. Man, there's something about you," and married her. And Salmon and Rahab had a son, and they named him Boaz. I'm pretty convinced that Boaz looked to Ruth and he said, "Wow, you're a lot like my mom." Yes, I think I will. Now we've got this other issue that we've got to take care of. And look, I'm not sure what will happen. Either way, you're only going to get redeemed. But look, if he doesn't, if he won't, I will. So let's finish verse 14. She lay down at his feet until morning, but got up while it was still dark. And Boaz says to her, "Let's keep this on the down low for a while. Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor and he told Ruth, 'Bring your shawl that you were wearing and hold it out.'" She held it out. He shoveled 6 measures of barley, like she could hardly carry that on. And she went into town. She went to her mother-in-law, Naomi, who asked her, "What happened to my daughter?" I can only imagine Naomi didn't sleep at night. She's like, "Not home yet. Okay, is that good? Is that bad? What's going on?" As soon as she sees Ruth, she's like, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" Ruth told her everything the man had done for her. She said, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley." So Ruth is thinking, it worked. We've got food for the next couple of weeks. Like, right? This whole thing worked. And Naomi's like, "Oh, you don't even understand." So much better. We have a Redeemer. You don't even know what he's offering us. And Naomi says, "My daughter." He says, "Wait until you find out how things go." And I love this statement, because now we got to deal with the other relative and to see if he's going to get involved. But Naomi is convinced. She says, "He won't rest until he resolves this today." Here's what you need to know. Your Redeemer will not rest until he fully resolves the matter of your full salvation. He won't rest until it's done. He's not going to rest until you and I and his children and his church are with him in the glories of heaven forever and ever. Amen. He's not going to rest until the matter's resolved. And Naomi knew, right? The redemption that they were looking for now was just very close to their having it. And now their hope has been restored, and their future has been restored. And yes, this is a beautiful love story. Not as romantic as I think some people might get out to be honest. I really didn't have to make it PG. It is. This is not a story on, 7 tips on how to catch a man. This is not what this is about. No, this is a tale of redemption of a desperate old woman by way of a faithful young woman and a redeemer. This is a story about the redeeming love of God for his people. Now, Naomi and Ruth chose Boaz to be their redeemer. The most important decision you will make is who is your redeemer. That's the most important decision you'll make in life. And my friends, if you choose the wrong redeemer, then the results will matter. This is part of our witness, right? We've got to ask people, who's your redeemer? Who have you chosen to be your redeemer? They may not even understand what that means, and you can explain. It's the most important decision to make. And if you have chosen Jesus to be your redeemer, good choice. You have chosen wisely. Because Jesus is the one who can provide everything that we need. Jesus is our kinsman redeemer. What does that mean? It means he's going to purchase the land that we need, the place that we need. It means he's going to purchase us out of the slave market of sin when we had no ability to save ourselves. It means that he will be the one that will perform the levirate marriage. He will take for himself a bride called the church. He will covenant with that church, and he will be the one who will shed the blood for blood. His blood for your blood on the cross. And he will perform everything that we need for our redemption, fully and free. Which is why I love this song that I grew up singing, redeemed, how I love to proclaim it, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, redeemed to his infinite mercy. How's it go? His child. And forever I am, because of our Redeemer Jesus. You don't have to be afraid of the future. And now, because we have a Redeemer in Jesus, now we can walk by faith, not by sight. We don't have to worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow I have enough worries of itself. My friend, like Ruth, living by faith is simply a matter of doing the next right thing. Father, bless your church. And bless this church. Thank you for 8 years of faithfulness. Thank you that they have served this community in so many important ways. Thank you that you have placed them in different locations, that they have struggled to figure out exactly where they would gather. And even now, Lord, I pray that we can't see the future, but you know it. This church would continue to walk by faith and simply do the next right thing, knowing that our Redeemer has a perfect plan.